Listen, I'm used to being in Gainbridge Fieldhouse, so I'm gonna need you to do a little better than that. One more time. Who's excited to be here tonight? Hey, I like that. I like that. It sounds a little bit more like home, our amazing Gainbridge Fieldhouse. Ladies, thank you so much for having me, Tamara. Exiting that Power Women event, Ruby, for those of you who were there, had a really powerful moment where she looked out in the crowd and said, "Do you have a problem trusting people who don't look like you?" And there was one young woman who stood up and said, "Yes, I do." She struggled with that. And if I'm being honest, in my journey, when I came to corporate America and when I entered the workforce, there were all these different programs for women, programs for black employees, and I didn't quite yet understand why things like that were necessary. And I was just naively, hey, I'm here, we're all talented, we're all qualified, right? Why are things different maybe for these marginalized communities? And I quickly realized that we all do have implicit biases in which these employee resource groups help aid in the development of. But those groups are made up of individuals, of individuals who are deeply committed to bridging gaps. Individuals who are saying, listen, I don't care what you look like or where you came from. If you are qualified and committed to do this job, you should have a chance. And the reason that Tamara and the board asked me to be here tonight is because I had someone like that who came in and bridged the gap, sent an email on my behalf and said, I don't know if we need anyone, but if we do, my team will reach out. And that person is our guest tonight. It's Dr. Allison Barber. We met, actually, I was at an Indiana Fever game, and this was a couple seasons ago, so things looked a bit different, right? We were playing up at the Indiana Farmers Coliseum because at the time Gainbridge Fieldhouse was going through renovations. And it was a season of building, right? And there were maybe under 1,000 fans. And I remember sitting there saying, I want to be a part of this thing. And on the court, right, the wins would not indicate the massive success that is being seen today, but there was something about the organization, the zeal of the players, the passion of the fans, and the investment that Pacer Sports and Entertainment made in the team. And I said, this is something I want to be a part of. I'm not sure how. I didn't even study sport management, but I want to be a part of it. So I went on my phone, and I looked up who ran this organization, and it was Dr. Allison Barber. I found her in the stadium, and I went down, and I just talked to her. People always ask, how did you get that job? I was like, I asked. And they're like, really? Yeah, really. But I didn't just ask anyone. I asked someone who is deeply committed to bringing the best and brightest to the organization. I asked someone that regardless of where you come from or what you look like, you would be seen for your skills, your abilities, your capabilities. And I know I'm standing in a room of women who are deeply committed to that, to not just leveling the playing field to do it, but to ensure that diverse voices, that the most qualified and the most skilled people are getting the opportunities. And so it is my pleasure to introduce tonight Dr. Allison Barber.
Olivia, I'm going to let you finish.
Yeah.
And I know I didn't say I was going to ask you questions, but I have a question.
Yeah.
What are 3 words you would use to describe Dr. Allison Barber?
3 words, I would say committed, because she's been deeply committed to this work for a long time. Throughout multiple organizations, her commitment is unwavering. I would say trustworthy. Because, Allison, when you gave me your contact information and I contacted you, first of all, you contacted me back, but then you also sent that email. You could have easily not sent that email and my life would have been a lot different. For the past 2 years, I've had the absolute privilege of serving both as an MC for the Fever and the Pacers, a dream that I didn't even know that was possible. And she's trustworthy. And the 3rd word, I would also say she's cool. That's probably not the most profound word, but truly someone who's open to new ideas and open to new faces and personalities. So those are my 3 words.
Thank you.
Yes, good stuff. All right, and now on to the bio. She's probably like, I'm never going to invite her back. She just gave a speech, and no, in all seriousness, thank you. Thanks for allowing me to introduce you, and just thank you for being those things So thanks. With a career that spans from the schoolhouse to the White House, and most recently the field house as the president and COO of the Indiana Fever, Indiana's WNBA franchise, Dr. Allison Barber has had a successful record of building brands and maximizing impact. From a grade school teacher in Maryville, Indiana, to a communication strategist at the White House and United States Department of Defense, as the first chancellor and chief fundraiser for Western Governors University, Indiana, Allison has dedicated herself to creating pathways to help individuals reach their potential. After spending 6 years building and inspiring Fever fans in all 92 counties of Indiana and beyond, Barber will continue her work of empowering young girls through sports as the leader of the Marvella Project. Barber understands the power of playing sports. A college athlete who lettered in tennis and softball, she values positive impact sports can have on both children and adults. She holds a BS in elementary education from Tennessee Temple University and an MS in elementary education from Indiana University, and a PhD in leadership from Tennessee. I just combined that word. Tennessee Temple University. She was the recipient of the Department of Defense Medal for Distinguished Public Service awarded by Defense Secretary Donald H. Rumsfeld and was recognized as a woman of influence by the Indianapolis Business Journal. In March of 2019, she was presented with Indiana's highest honor, the Sagamore of the Wabash, presented by Governor Eric Holcomb. Barber is the board chair for the Sagamore Institute and serves on the board of the American Red Cross, Indiana, Destination Development Corporation, and the Indiana Chamber. She volunteers at the Elizabeth Dole Hidden Heroes Foundation, Wheeler Mission, and WNBA All-Star 2025. Women's Fun, let's give a warm welcome to Dr. Allison Barber.
Thank you so much for joining us.
I'm happy to be here. Thank you, Olivia. Let's take it on the road, sister. What a great story.
So there was method to my madness
Okay.
when I asked for those 3 words, because one of our favorite questions for guests of Women's Fund has been asking for 3 words to describe yourself. And sometimes the way other people see us is not how we see ourselves. So I wonder what your 3 words would be.
Not cool, but so thank you. It's hard to, I will tell you, I am optimistic, purposeful, and intentional.
Oh, I like that. So building on that, so for people who don't know about your illustrious career, like you've heard a little bit of it, you've worn many hats.
Yes.
So can you briefly tell us about your journey to the Indiana Fever, and maybe how those 3 things, the 3 ways you describe yourself, how they've served you?
Thank you, I will, and I'd be happy to. I'm so happy to meet so many of you tonight. I'm sorry I haven't met everybody, but I'm inspired by this group because you talk about purposeful, intentional, and committed. I've met so many of you who've started your own company. Good for you. That's the riskiest thing you can do, but you can do it. And so I applaud each of you for just being bold and courageous. I started off as a first grade school teacher in Maryville, Indiana. My family region. Let's go.
Woo!
We're home.
Yeah.
We're home. Born in Gary, grew up in Miller.
Me, same, right?
So, first grade school teacher, loved the possibility of teaching children something and things that will shape their entire life. And education's just the pathway to success. There's no question about that. My husband was practicing law. The first Gulf War broke out, and he came home and he said, I really want to serve the country. We both quit our jobs, and he joined the Army. And the Army said, hey, where do you 2 want to go? Give us a list, here are all the military bases in the world. Where would you like to go? Give us your top 5 choices. Oh, we thought, Germany, Hawaii, these are good options. And they shipped us to New Jersey.
It's the Hawaii of the East Coast.
Okay. If anybody of you need branding people, I would go with, that was big right there. That was a flex for New Jersey. When we were in New Jersey, I decided to reinvent myself. I've done this now 8 times. I find it exhilarating. It is not for everyone. I love the difficult of what's my purpose, where can I be intentional. Growing up, my dad and I played basketball in the driveway. He would always say, "Take it to the hoop, kid," which is why my company is called To the Hoop Strategies. Get closer to the hoop, you might make it, but what he was really teaching me was have a goal, have drive, don't be afraid to have the ball in your hand. And there's a lot of risk that is associated with that. You know, if you miss a layup in basketball, the closest shot to the basket, if you miss that, people make fun of you. If you miss Caitlin Clark's shot, nobody expects you to make it anyway. So there's risk with taking it to the hoop. I kind of love that. So that's my dad's voice in my head. My mom's voice in my head was, check your motives, play to your strengths. Check your motives, play to your strengths. She grew up in a Christian home, so it was rooted in your spiritual gifting. If you're not in that faith, you could root it in the Gallup Strength Finders, which I'm a big fan of, but play to your strengths. It's the same idea. You're uniquely you. Live into that. So we moved to New Jersey. I start to go on job interviews, and people say, well, no, you're a teacher. I taught for 6 years. I had my master's. Nobody could see me as something different. And guess what? I couldn't either because I didn't know what the next thing was. So I took every job interview I could get, 50 job interviews. Book sales, car sales, actress in New York. They said, oh, you know what, Allison, you've got talent. You could be in commercials if you just take this class for $300. The real joke is I took the class for $300, and here I am today. So as I'm applying for these jobs, and it was not easy, there was a lot of rejection that came with that, and people couldn't see in me what I could be, and I had to figure out what that would be too. At the same time, my husband suggested, I've been a Red Cross volunteer since I was 16. I love the Red Cross. Our mission is to help alleviate human suffering. I mean, how do you not love that?
Argue with that.
Right? I started volunteering at the Red Cross, and I'm telling you guys, I had the worst volunteer experience in this way. I stood in a warehouse by myself every day shipping boxes for the Red Cross. I've taught school for 6 years. I have a master's. I'm shipping boxes. But from that point, the manager of the program for the boxes I was shipping said, hey, we're moving this program to Washington, D.C. Would you interview for it? To manage this program, I interviewed, I got the job. The crazy thing for me is there are 2 points. When I was in my early 20s, teaching school in Maryville, working at a country club in the summer to augment my $16,000 a year salary. I'm a pool and swim instructor because I'm a Red Cross trained certified instructor. So I'm managing pool and tennis and all the things. One day I'm clocking in, and next to the wall back in the old days where you clock in are the Department of Labor rules that everybody has to post. Donna from Pacers, you know what I'm talking about, right? Back in the day. I clock in, and I look at the autograph of the Secretary of Labor, and I say to myself, I'm going to work for her someday. I'm in Northwest Indiana, school teacher. For some reason, I think I'm going to work for her someday. Backwards, 4 more years before that, I'm in Washington, D.C. on my senior trip in Washington, D.C. I love politics. I have since I was probably 10. I go up into the Washington Monument, and I'm 18 years old. I stand at the Washington Monument. This is pre-9/11. You'd be shot if you did it today. Yeah. I stand there, my shadow is being cast across Washington, D.C., and I scream at the top of my lungs, I'll be back. I'll be back. I'm 18. I'll be back. 10 years later, 28 years old, I'm working in Washington, D.C. now for the Red Cross, and guess who the president is? The former Secretary of Labor, Elizabeth Dole. All that to say, don't be afraid to dream. There was no path at all. to go from Maryville to DC, and you never would say, oh, well, let me just ship boxes in a warehouse so I can work for the woman who, when I clocked in, I saw her name. And next week I'll be in DC for her gala for Hidden Heroes, because I get to volunteer for Elizabeth now and help military caregivers, and it's awesome. But all these things say it's not a straight path. But that got me to DC, and my husband got transferred. And then the last thing in this crazy career of mine is I decided to change jobs. We were going to go to Germany. The Army's finally sending us somewhere. Germany is the New Jersey of the Europe, I guess.
Yeah.
So we're supposed to go, so I quit my job, and now we go month after month after month with no movement because of my husband's case he was working on. So in this interim, I volunteer for the Red Cross again. Notice the theme. I babysit for my girlfriend who just had a baby, and it was a little bit much, 1 day a week, and I visit my dear friend who was dying of brain cancer. Those were three things I did every week. When the Army canceled our orders and said, guess what, you guys stay in DC because of my husband's work, I thought I better get a job. But every job offer I had, and I had plenty, I was so grateful. If I took one of those 9 offers I had, I couldn't volunteer, I couldn't babysit, and I couldn't visit Michelle. So I didn't do any of them, and I started my own business. Not because I ever wanted my own business, because I wanted to be intentional about my priorities, and those 3 things outweighed that. This is why I encourage those of you who are starting your own business. It's hard. There's no safety net, but you can do it. So I did that for a while, and then the Bush administration asked me to come inside the Pentagon and help with communication. I did that for several years. I ran all the programs for the troops around the world, global communication, and then programs to connect people to the troops. And that started that after 9/11. I was in a plane on 9/11, landed in Atlanta, found out the country was under attack, rented a van, drove back to the Pentagon, building on fire, President Bush coming to see the volunteers. I mean, it was surreal. So did that job, and then they asked me to go to the White House to stand up the Office of Global Communication, because we needed to make sure our message was being clearly communicated. That won me my all-expense trip to Iraq during a war. I got to Iraq the first time. This is such a sidebar. I get to
Middle East, right?
The Hawaii of the Middle East.
Yeah.
Nice.
Right.
Yes. No. I land in Iraq. I didn't want to go. Some people are really courageous, like, I'm going to go and support. And I'm not that person. I'm a first grade school teacher. Like, I will write you a check. I will start a little march for you. I was not one of those people that was like, I'm going to go to a war zone. God bless my husband and all the troops. My husband volunteered. He was deployed to Iraq while I'm like dropping in and out for weekends, not to see him, but to do my job. I land in Iraq the first time. This is such a side note. I land in Iraq the first time. I'm early, and so my detail's not there to pick me up. And there's a bus, and it says Green Zone. I was working out of Saddam's palace and stayed actually in his palace. Green Zone. So I'm like, well, that's where I need to get to. I get on the bus. The bus takes me to the Green Zone. I get off. I walk into the office, and I see the first colonel, and I said, I'm Allison Barber from the Pentagon. He's like, ma'am, how'd you get here? I said, I took the bus. And he said, the suicide bus? Oh. I said, well, it didn't say that on the... I'm pretty sure I wouldn't have gotten on that bus.
Right.
Like, I might not be that smart, but I'm smart enough not to get on that bus.
Yeah.
So I did that job and loved serving our troops and doing work in ways that were important, and then decided to move home to be with family. And the Governor Daniels at the time, Lauren, there you are, running the Mitch Daniels Foundation, is that right? The governor asked me if I would start WGU Indiana. Never been done before. That's like my love language. If somebody says to me it's never been done before, I'm super curious about it. And I know that's not in the love language book, but it should be. Yeah. Like, time together, okay, fine. If we're doing something that's never been done before, like, as long as that's a part of it, I'm in. So we did WGU for several years and loved it, and then got a call from the Fever and Pacers saying, would you come just, help keep our brand relevant during the transition, and met Donna for coffee at Starbucks on 16th Street, and we decided we'd give this thing a shot and did it and had a blast, and then now moved on.
I feel like one of the things I heard in that was kind of a just take the shot.
Yeah, absolutely.
Even from Olivia's story, it's
Yeah.
like you just take the shot. You get nothing if you don't take the shot. So I'm wondering, in all of that,
Yeah.
and that was a lot, what is the thing you're most proud of?
The next thing.
Okay, you can't answer that. We're not on that yet. What is it? You got to look backwards. What's it? Wrong answer, right? Yeah.
There are so many things, because I'm grateful because I've had these opportunities. But when I was probably 30, a lot of people do vision boards, they write a year for the word, and I just kept landing on the thing I care the most about is contribution. And so I look at everything through the lens of contribution. If I can do this thing, will I be contributing to the good of someone else? And I've been so blessed around each career we've just detailed has had opportunities to just put whatever I can bring to the table if it results in contributing to helping someone else. That's what I'm, grateful for.
So now you also said you like hard things.
I love hard things.
So I wonder, what is your greatest failure? And
there's a long
what
list.
did you learn from it? Yeah.
You guys, I'm so excited about this lunch I'm going to have in D.C. this week. I have a folder in my desk. It's called my humility folder, and it's a real thing. When I screw up, I jot myself a note, and I throw it in my humility folder because I think it's important in life. It's probably my mom's voice in my head. But I do think it's important in life when, you're here today, you're part of a very important group. You've accomplished things in your life. You've been successful. You are successful. What keeps you grounded? And you have to be careful because a lot of people, there are three things. If you listen to the book, Hidden Potential, it talks about there are three things. You have, critics who tell you why you're wrong. You have cheerleaders who think you're great. But you need coaches who keep challenging you to be better. And sometimes you just kind of want to hang out with your cheerleaders because life can be hard. And it feels kind of good for somebody to say, you're cool. Thank you, Olivia. Nobody has ever called me cool. This is a big night for me. But I keep a humility folder on purpose because I don't want to forget that there's more to learn and I make mistakes. In my humility folder was when I went to the Red Cross for this new job, and it was a pharmaceutical division of the Red Cross. We sold freeze-dried human tissue from cadavers for orthopedic surgery. And my boss said, you need a brochure to send all the dentists. And I honestly, I wish I should have brought a picture of this. I'm dutiful, So I get out my color pencils, sketch out what I think a brochure could be. And the next day I'm going to go meet with the head of communication for the American Red Cross, National American Red Cross. Like, they are real people.
Oh, I bet they loved that.
This is so embarrassing. I drew the equivalent, I'm not kidding you, it looks like Christopher Columbus sailing across the ocean. And it says, coming to you, tissue services, or some ridiculous, like, coming soon, here's Christopher, sketched out. And I took it to the meeting, and I showed them some ideas, and they were so generous and kind toward me. And they took my notes. We had this great conversation. 2 weeks later, they sent me this slick, multicolor, pharmaceutical marketing brochure like Lily would do. And I was like, oh. Time to start a humility folder. Those two things were the first entry in my humility folder, and next Tuesday, I'm taking those women to lunch, and I'm taking copies of that. They don't even know I've kept that. They don't remember. Well, they might, because it was ridiculous, but I'm taking that because in that moment, they taught me to be generous toward people. Like, they saw my intentionality, and I was purposeful. I was misguided, totally. But they didn't make fun of me, they didn't put me down, and they just showed me a better way. And so this humility folder, there are a lot of mistakes in that folder that, and I'm okay with that because it means I'm still trying, and I've got things to learn and develop.
I love that idea of a humility folder. So what do? Do you go back and look at, like?
You know, sometimes
what
I do.
Yeah.
I do.
Yeah.
You know, and I'll just, this
Do you
is.
keep an I'm cool folder? Like, that you can
No.
look at all your awesome stuff too? Right.
That is kind of funny because I said to somebody, I have a humility folder, and this person who said, oh, that's like me. I keep a folder of all the great things I've done. I'm like, no, that's not actually it. I don't know what that is, but I know that's 180 out of what I'm talking about. I'm fortunate to have, had success because of the people around me. Tamara, this is the thing. When I moved to Indianapolis, I didn't know anybody except my family. And in my first 365 days, I met with 214 people. Do the math. Wow. 214 people in this city took meetings with me to talk about WGU Indiana, a university they'd never heard of and a chancellor they've never seen. But that's what we do in Indiana. We share our contacts and our credibility. And that's what Olivia was talking about. It's like you share what are we doing if we're not doing that? Share your contacts and share your credibility. Olivia got an interview. She had to win the opportunity. She got the interview because of an email of doing for Olivia what 214 people did for. I better be giving back to every single person. 214 people. That's what I love about our city.
So out of all those people, like, you have brushed shoulders with a lot of amazing people. What's the best advice you've ever gotten?
Well, so recently, let's make it relevant. I don't know if you've heard of Caitlin Clark?
Once or twice, right? Yeah.
She's awesome. I hope you get to meet her. She's as good as you think she is. And I was up there for Ball State Monday when she was doing her show with David Letterman taping. So if you get a chance, if you're on Netflix, it was awesome. When we were fortunate enough at the Fever to get the first pick in the draft, and then Caitlin announced that she was going to the draft, we have 6,000 from Thursday night at 4:21 p.m. to Sunday night. 6,000 people called to buy tickets. Wow. Unheard of. Jersey sales went up 1,193%. I'm not great at math. I think that's good. But when Caitlin came out and said she was going to the draft, then we knew we would have her. So I asked some people in sports, I said, have you ever had an inflection point like this where something like that changed overnight? And even our great owner, Herb Simon, I said, in all your businesses, has it happened overnight like this? And he said, no. And I thought, well, as a leader, you always have to be learning and figuring out how do you take a great moment and build to the next moment. That's your job. So I reached out to a successful tech giant and said, could I meet with you? Because I feel like we at the Fever, for 25 years, this amazing franchise in our city, we've been writing code in our basement and our IPO just hit. Like, this is a different moment. How do we prepare for it? And I met with him, and he said, Allison, it's exactly what we did at our startup. We were saving paper clips as a startup, and then we sold our company for billions of dollars. Your biggest challenge is to go from a scarcity mentality to an abundance mentality. Stephen Covey writes about this all the time. That advice, there were two, and then I met with a former governor and said, how do you handle, they're inflection points. You'll have them in your life, you'll have them in your career. Find somebody who's had them too and learn from that. The former governor said, Allison, do first things first. He said, you're going to want to write the script for how to maximize this a year from now and 2 years. First things first. Caitlin has to put a ball through the hoop. So write a list of what happens first. So I did. What were the first things? And then I kept challenging all of us, myself included, abundance. And I had to learn it too. I said to Shayna Sangster, our director of marketing, who's awesome, and I said, Shayna, what should we do? You know, Ted Lasso, maybe he loves watching Caitlin. What should we do? We should figure out how to, and she looked at me, she goes, Allison, he'll probably come. I'm like, oh, that's right. We don't have to be that gritty.
Yeah.
Like, it's an abundance mentality. And so I think that was probably most recently the best advice I've had.
So tell us about your next chapter.
Okay.
What happens after the fever?
Yeah, the inspiration really was this wonderful job at the Fever of seeing the power of sports across this entire demographic of every age and race, and it just didn't matter. Everybody was excited about what we were able to do with the Fever. And it's not just Caitlin, it's the whole team, but she's something special for sure. In watching all of that, as a school teacher, I think, well, what more can you do to help more kids? And right about the same time, Tamika Catchings, who I know you know, and Morgan? Yes, did I get that right? Yeah, one of Morgan's clients. She said, would you take this meeting with these guys, GT Sports? They're creating this new concept for girls and women in sports. So I took the meeting, and when I did, I thought, this is probably my next thing. So the Marvella Project is the country's first, sounds like Indiana, the country's first girls' sport and leadership experience. We named it Marvella because it's named for Marvella By, Senator Birch By, who penned Title IX. His wife Marvella could not go to college because there was no Title IX. So as you might know, Title IX was really first and foremost about financial aid and then other activities, which became sports. So Marvella inspired her husband. He wrote Title IX, which changed, if you went to college and got financial aid, even if you didn't play sports, changed your life. Marvella Project, we're building it at Fair Oaks Farms. I do think sometimes this might be the hardest thing I've done because there's not a safety net. It's a startup. Like I went up to see it. I'm like, oh my word, there's nothing but 120 acres. Nothing. And we're going to create the most spectacular experience for girls 18 and under from all over the country. We'll build this in Indiana. We will perfect it and build 4 more around the country. Girls will come, basketball, volleyball, soccer, field hockey, lacrosse, rugby, flag football, all the sports. And then we're also building a success center, teaching girls about mental health, physical health, nutrition, all of the things that we know there's a deficit in our nation. And so we're going to do our part. And by year 5, our model says that we'll have 400,000 girls coming through the Marvella Project, playing sports, and then learning about life skills at the same time.
I love that. So my question is, because that sounds amazing,
Thank you.
So exciting.
Great, we're taking donations.
But but
Like maybe the option class with like the scholarship,
Right.
some of the
But you had a pretty cool job before.
I did, yes.
So how do you know
Yeah.
when it's time to go or when it's time to change? Because it's easy to know when you're unhappy.
Yeah.
But when you're not unhappy and you have a really great job, and I mean, I would dare to say this is probably the best year of the Fever ever.
That's right.
Like all this attention. How do you know when it's time to change?
Okay, great question. So what did my mom say? Check your motives, play to your strengths. So in every job, and I have changed jobs, I've not just changed jobs, I've changed careers 8 times. Because, and this is a real life thing, and I encourage you to think about it, your career goes on an S cycle. So you think about the S, right? And in the bottom of the S, 0 to 1 super hard because you don't even know where the restrooms are, and you don't know anything. Then you move up, you start gaining competencies. And as you move around the S, when you get to the middle of the S, it's magical. You still have a lot to learn, but you're smart enough to make a difference. Magical. When you get to the top of the S, you're at a plateau. And when you hit the plateau, it's time to go. So sometimes you make the choice, sometimes your company sees a different skill set in you or a skill set in someone else that needs to take it to that next level. You know, the Fever, my job, when I came in, it was about keeping the brand relevant while the team got built underneath it. The coaches, X's and O's mean I love you to me. Like, I got nothing for you on all of the X's and O's, and I didn't need to. But in fairness, for the Fever, what they need now is the next basketball mind to take this. The brand is built. because of the work of a lot of people at Pacer Sports Entertainment and you in the community. They need the next X and O brain to say, how do we take the Fever now to the next level with coaching and players, and that's a different skill set. So every time I've left a career, it's because you've got to play to your strengths. And sometimes you see it, sometimes somebody else on the outside sees it, sometimes your bosses see it, and it's an okay thing. It's a transition that you have to embrace and say, what's next? And don't be afraid of what's next. You get one chance at this life. It's not a dress rehearsal. And even when you can't figure out what that looks like, don't be afraid to sit in that moment, and you'll figure it out. So it's risky for sure. It's not for everyone, and that's okay too. But I wouldn't be afraid of it.
It always feels like to me that when there's no more stretch left in a position, there's no more challenge, then it's time to go.
Yeah.
Because you don't want to be inert.
Right.
You know, you want to continue to grow as a person. But I wonder, but that can be scary, right?
Sure.
I mean, you're doing startup now.
Yeah.
You know, so where do you find the courage to, at 18 years old, stand in D.C. and say, I'll be back,
Yeah.
or to get on the suicide bus,
Yeah.
or to leave, you know, this amazing position at the Fever and say, I'm going to go do a startup? Like, where do you find that courage?
By the people around me. You know, I get to hang out with some amazing people growing up, of course, people, but I think about Ethel Andrus, who was a teacher and principal in California, first female principal in the state of California. She retires, she goes to the grocery store, and somebody said, do you know the story? I don't even know, I didn't either until I learned more about her a few years ago. She goes to the grocery store and they said, hey, Ethel, do you know one of your teachers lives in a chicken coop? Because they had no retirement. She goes out to the farm, asks the farmer, is my teacher in the chicken coop? Yeah. She goes back to the chicken coop. The retired teacher said, I don't have any money. And Ethel's like, that's not acceptable. So she and her friends get together and they start to figure out, how do we write a retirement plan for teachers? And they go to 29 insurance agencies and finally find one man who would write a policy for teachers so when they retire, they have money. And she started National Teachers Retirement Association. And then other people were like, well, we want retirement too. It's before Medicare. We want retirement too. So they morphed the National Teachers Retirement Association, something maybe you've heard of, AARP. Wow. Ethel was in her mid-70s when she started AARP. Elizabeth Dole would visit her senator husband, Bob Dole, at Walter Reed and see all these young military caregivers who had no support. She had all the support she needed. They didn't. What's she going to do about that? So 10 years ago, she started a foundation to support caregivers, military caregivers. 5 million people are supporting and caring for a military member, 3 million since 9/11. She started Hidden Heroes Foundation. Tom Hanks and Savannah Guthrie are our spokespeople. Elizabeth was mid-70s. So if you surround yourself with people that say, there's a problem, and by golly, I'm going to solve it, it gives you courage.
I love that. I could sit here and talk to Allison all night. This has been absolutely amazing. And I wonder, just as a last question, because you have done so much and experienced so much, what is something you might leave with all of these women who are amazing and accomplished and in different stages in their careers? What do you say to other women who are coming up behind you?
Yay, good for you.
Really cool.
Listen, I want to be really cool. She just said I was cool. She did not say, Olivia, you did not say really cool.
Right?
You just said cool. So I got work to do.
Yeah, it's okay.
Thankfully, that's served by my goal. Okay. It's a good thing, right? So I would say a couple of things. One, surround yourself with the right people. When I worked in the Pentagon, somebody said to me, be careful, Allison, you have a lot of power, and everybody's going to say they're your friend because you have power. And this woman said to me, your friends come to your birthday party. Those are your friends. I went back home and I wrote a list of the people that would come to my birthday party. And when I worked at the Pentagon, the White House, and believe me, you have to have thick skin to work in those jobs, which I'm kind of mad about because I think it weighs more, and that made me mad. But you have to develop thick skin because a lot of people are out to get you. And that's not you personally, but it feels like it. So then I came up with a shorter list, which is my kidney donor list. If I'm sick and I need a kidney, you're going to give me yours. And if you're sick, I'm going to give you mine. Like, that's a pretty short list. But let me tell you how that plays out for me every day. When I'm taking on new challenges and new jobs, and when I'm in a career when people are critical, at the Fever, when we had some bad games and bad people are like, I'd get emails, fire your coach, fire fire, and then I got an email that says, you should be fired. I'm like, nice, I have finally arrived. Somebody thinks I'm relevant here. There are a lot of critics. Remember, critics, cheerleaders, coaches. A lot of critics. So here's how I do my life, and I just share this with you because it's been super helpful. In social media, in the world we live in, it can be hard. If you are on my birthday list, then you get an opinion. I care about your opinion. If you're on my kidney donor list, you get a vote. Should I take this job? Should I do this thing? Should I hire this person? You get a vote. And if you're not in my kidney donor list or my birthday party list, I can't hear you. And that's how you protect yourself, to try and do the difficult, to take on the hard challenges, to start AARP in your 70s, and care for wounded warriors. You do it because you have the right people around you that help give you courage.
Allison, thank you so much, not just for being here tonight, but for all you have done and the ways that you have contributed and helped make a better world for women and girls. People from the region are awesome. That's all I have to say from that.
Thank you. Great to be with everybody. Good luck.